Hi, I'm Katie, and welcome to Hey It Gets Better. This is the podcast where I chat to people about the ups and downs of their lives and how they got to where they are now. Life can be pretty tough sometimes, there's no escaping that fact. But at Hey It Gets Better, we're all about talking about the journey. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and remember, hey, it gets better. Before I get into today's episode, I just want to give a trigger warning as we do discuss stillbirths in this episode. Hi, welcome to Hey It Gets Better. Today I'm joined by Danusia Malina-Derben, who is an entrepreneur, mother, author of Noise, a manifesto of Modernising Motherhood, podcaster. You've also had a career in academics and you are a C-suite transformative business expert. I think I've covered everything there.
Oh, that's great. Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on here today.
Oh, thanks, Katie. I'm very thrilled to be here too.
So I'm going to start with the first question, which is a massive one, and you can give as many answers to it as you want, but it is, what challenges did you face to get to where you are now?
Oh, that's a biggie, isn't it? Oh, you weren't wrong there. Okay, what challenges? Oh, blimey. Okay. Wow. Well, I guess one of the biggest first challenges would be that I was born in an orphanage, and I stayed there with my mother, my biological mother, for a year, and then a year and 1 day old, I was handed over to a new family, and my name was changed, and I stepped into a new identity, a new life, new parents, and a new way forward, a new future. And so that was a very privileged thing to have happened to me, to have spent a year with my mum, and then to meet another mum and dad, and to kind of inherit a whole new life and a new journey. And one of the challenges that was built into that was that actually I was the only adopted child that I knew. I briefly knew a child who I heard about and that might be adopted. You know, it was that kind of, wow, she might be like me. And certainly in my schools, there was nobody. There was nobody that was known to be adopted. And I put it that way because, of course, there may well have been a child that was adopted but didn't know it. But certainly I was the only child that knew and talked about it. And I wasn't fixated on it. It's not like I constantly talked about it. But it set me apart from other people, because when we are growing up with our biological family of origin, that we are with our people, and so to have been handed over was something I had to decipher, and I had to think about what that meant for me. And of course, there's lots of stories about adoption. One of the favourite ones being, you were so wanted that actually, we had to wait for you, etc. Wasn't quite the case in mine. I was adopted by a lovely but quite weird couple, and lovely people, but very odd. They would never get through the stringent requirements that adopted families have to go through. Certainly now, and I've got some friends who've adopted children, so I know that it would be very difficult for my mum and dad to adopt now. But clearly, I was meant to arrive and grow up with them, and so that kind of challenge is one of my first that would. And it was from a very early age. I was told that my mum was dead, but on my 7th birthday, my mum, but for ease I'll call her my adopted mum, told me that in fact she hadn't quite told me the truth. That in fact my mother was alive. And so that was a bit challenging, because at first I could square it away in my head, my little head, that my mummy couldn't be with me, so that was okay. But to hear that she was actually alive was, I mean, it's a challenge. It was a challenge. And I had to kind of, sort out, okay, if she's alive, where is she? So, what is she doing where she is and not where I am? And what are you doing here? And I do love you, but what are you doing here and not her? So that was a challenge to me in terms of my identity.
That's a lot for a 7 years old as well, to kind of understand those quite big, complex questions.
Absolutely. And so I had the fortune of, my parents lived beside a very senior BBC producer, and I'd heard this, and I had designs on being, I think the phrase is, or the word is, found. And in other words, Katie, my talents would be noticed. And so this poor guy whose kitchen backed onto my bedroom. Nice, they were so they were side by side down this little pathway. I sang every bedtime, loud as I could, so that the man next door would find me. He didn't. He didn't find me. I think he probably found me to be extremely torturous. But some years later, I actually did work for BBC Two. And just fortuitously, the BBC did find me, but it wasn't as a child, which just makes
it's
me
not
laugh.
The way you planned.
No, it wasn't. But you know what? The lesson in that is sow the seed, be intentional. And I've actually never told anybody this, so it's actually quite funny. It's like, sow the seed that you are going to be found by the BBC, because I was very specific. I wanted the BBC to see my talents. And some years later, when I was working in Manchester at the university there, I had a call from the BBC to ask me if it was an approach directed to me to say, we're looking for a woman with several children, in a relatively senior role, very ambitious, and we have a very specific presenting job for her. And we want to know if you'd come and talk to us about it. And sure enough, I did that, and was worked with them for 3.5 years, and became, they found me.
Yeah, that's a really good story about, who knew that when you were very young, singing in your bedroom, that you would in fact end up at the BBC. I find it really interesting that, the first challenge you kind of experience is about identity, because I think that's, from what I understand, another challenge that kind of comes up throughout your life, especially when you became a mother, because you had your first son at 17.
Mm-hmm.
And I think identity is a constant kind of thing to think about. I don't think it stops when you become a teenager. It's throughout your 20s, and then throughout your 30s and your 40s and your 50s. What do you think about kind of like identity and shaping it?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I mean, a lot of the narrative around identity certainly looks at our younger formative years as if identity is at its peak then. But actually, that's a very skewed way of looking at it, because yes, sure, in our teens, we're forming our identity, we're finding who we are, which is really why, that search around adoption and who am I? Mine was in a particular way, but we all have it, don't we? I know I had several friends when I was at school that used to laugh and say, God, if I'd love to find I was adopted, why am I in this house of mad people? Surely they're not actually related to me, are they? Whereas I could literally say, well, no, mine aren't. So, which is funny. I had a get out clause when, if I had something happen with my mum, I could just say, well, she just probably doesn't understand me, which, was right, actually. But it's because we're grappling with our identity when we're shaping it. And then in our 20s, 30s, and as you say, every other decade, we're still grappling with our emerging sense of self. And that constantly changes, doesn't it? As we integrate knowledge and about ourselves and about the world, how we fit into it, what we want, who we want to be, because as we grow and mature, we may or may not realize that actually we can create ourselves. And I think my first challenge really taught me that I had a blank sheet. I wasn't just taken from my home and plonked into another home, same name, same kind of more or less similar trajectory, possibly. No, it was a blank canvas. My name was obliterated. I did not have it anymore. I was a new person. And so as I was growing up, I realized, I kind of can be who I decide to be. Who do I decide to be? What do I value? And that began very early. I had to make that choice point when I discovered I was pregnant at 17. That was not a planned event. And I'm deeply grateful to my son. I'm deeply grateful to myself that I made the choice to keep him, albeit I do want to say that I'm not anti-abortion. It's not my gratitude is not because I morally chose a pathway. It's because actually it took me down a route that was incredibly full of growth. It was challenging. It was a massive challenge. I was on the brink of going. I was about to go to the Italia Conti stage school, and I'd won a coveted scholarship to go, and I made the choice not to do that. During his teens, I sometimes did think, was that the best thing to have done? but that's, every parent wonders, God, particularly when kids are being challenging. But I've never regretted, truthfully, I've never regretted in any length of time the choice that I made, which changed my identity. Had I gone to stage school and continued, I probably would have not had children for years. I would have been devoted to my career potential in the performing arts. And actually what happened was I circuitously found myself there anyway. I actually, because I believe talent, our potential rises, it will rise, it will come to flourish in one way or another if we're open to it. And I never stop being open to my potential. And I intend to do that into my 80s. And if I'm lucky to get to 90s, I will assume that, health willing, that I will be able to keep nurturing my identity, the woman that I will be then. She won't be the woman I am today, but she'll be, the spirit will be there with her, I hope.
That's really powerful and incredibly kind of shows a level of self-awareness that I think is very, very important to have. And I think from what your story and how you found who you were, it takes like that. You did that at quite a young age, and even and I think having a child as well at a young age does result in you maturing quite quickly too, because you're looking after another human being, which is a massive thing. And you also have different things come into it, like feeding another person, bills, and it's a lot. And to still kind of, I think there's a narrative in society that is about young mothers that is just completely wrong. The fact that that's it, once you've had a kid while you're young. And your story just shows just how wrong that narrative is. And it's still like perpetuated in society, which is just incredibly wrong.
Yeah, it is. So I write about it in my book, actually, because there's memoir pieces in the dedicated pieces in the book. And my parents were very clear that I had completely and utterly ruined my life, that I would be nobody, I would make nothing of myself, and that was it. And they were even more blunt about it. What they said was that they hadn't adopted me to just have me be a mother. And so there was a very big message about the denigration of motherhood in there, which I had made my choice. I was very immovable on my choice. And my father did not speak to me from the minute that I made the choice with the consultant not to have the abortion they wanted me to have. And basically, he didn't speak to me until Freddie was, I think, around 5 months old. So more than a year. He stonewalled me for the entire time. And I had to live with my parents. So it was, and I was very, very close to my dad. We had a wonderful relationship throughout my childhood. So this was a, a very punishing result of going against their wishes, which was sad. And it's a great pity that there's such a perpetuation of this idea that young girls who have children young, that it is the end of everything. I will say that resourcing yourself to actually, let's be honest, it's not an easy path.
Yeah.
It really isn't an easy path to raise, kids when you're very young, because you're still developing as yourself and growing up alongside your children. And so I had 4 children by the time I was 22, 4 boys. And so my sons have a different version of a mother, and a very good mother. I mean, I was a very good mum. I was very dedicated. I tried so hard. I was such, I wanted to demonstrate that kind of perfect mum model in a way to actually say, no, look, I can do this. Don't you say I can't do this. But a lot of that would also be masking the fact that it was bloody hard, really, really tough. But I was also lucky that my husband was 20 years older, so I had a hugely loving, supportive, older man beside me. So I mean that was a great thing. One of the things I haven't mentioned was when I had Freddie, age 17, the very social worker that took me from the arms of my mother, my biological mother, and handed me to my adopted parents, I actually met her. So she came and met me at age 17 with my baby. And so there was a really poignant moment to know it was the same woman. It was exactly the same human being that had held me and passed me over to this family. And she was seeing me with my baby. And there was a completion cycle there. I've been to the room that I was born in the orphanage. I've met the Salvation Army officers that looked after me. I have met my biological mother. She saw me on the BBC. Just remember.
Wow.
I was on the programme, and she was reading a book, and she looked up and looked at my face and went, "Oh, wow, that's got to be my child," because we're very similar looking, very. So there's lots of kind of completion cycles that almost kind of like those little seeds being sown that we can find in our lives sometimes if we look for them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of my listeners are in their 20s, and one kind of thing to say is that a lot of the seeds, you might not be able to see them just yet because they're still being sown, and
Yes.
it may take a few years for you to be like, oh, that really kind of thing I didn't want to happen at that time actually was really good to happen in the long run.
Oh, definitely. And one of the sayings I adopt is that good or bad, hard to say. And so when something amazing happens, I say good or bad, hard to say. Even though I'm also celebrating it, it's to hold the possibility that even though this might seem amazing, and it is amazing, there's no taking away from it, but what's this going to lead to? And the same with really awful things that happen, really awful things. Like, I had a stillbirth, um, and it was devastating, and I scattered her ashes, and after postmortem, and it was my biggest fear. I never wanted to have to bury, as I put it to myself, I don't want to have to bury a child of mine. And so the universe provided me with the opportunity to effectively bury my child, and labour with her, give birth to her, wait for a post-mortem, scatter ashes, come to terms with the, a different path than I imagined. And so good or bad, hard to say, good or bad. She was the the kind of big piece that showed me that if we don't have heart, we have nothing, because her post-mortem came back, Katie, with no anomalies. There was nothing, there was no genetic reason. There was nothing. She was a perfectly formed little baby. She just didn't stay alive. And what they said was her heart just stopped. There was no other way to describe it. There was nothing, there was no reason, there was no illness, there was nothing. It was just her heart just didn't go on. And so I learned, wow, okay, so if you don't have heart in something, you don't have anything really. You have to have your heart in it. So whether that's a role in a career, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's in your hobbies, whether that's in for yourself, if you've got no heart, it's not going to keep going. So I thank her for that. Her name was Madeline, and Madeline taught me enormous lessons about my own resilience and life, and that was through a something that, let's be honest, I was really hoping I'd never have to face.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so sorry to hear about Madeline, and I can't even begin to imagine how difficult that was, but to have come out the other side of it with such a poignant message that you can carry throughout your life. It's very, I mean, it's very difficult to comprehend these experiences in life as someone, especially who hasn't gone through any of it. That's the type of thing where I guess you can live in fear of experiencing that, and it is particularly when you see things on the news about this and you hear personal stories, it can bring into question about things like motherhood and experiencing it, and also if it's right for you as well. This kind of leads me on to like this wider discussion which you get with noise. How do you work out what is for you and what isn't?
Oh, well, I really had to write noise because all I could see was, and hear was all these kind of gospel messages, these messages about motherhood that seemed to be fixed. Like, oh, when you become a mother, this will happen. Oh, when you be, and it's all the noise. The noise is telling us day in, day out how things will be or how we have to behave. And then of course we ingest it and then we regurgitate it because we act as if it's truth. And the thing that I was struck by was the fact that one of the reasons that I can create so much in my life and my career and with my children and relationships is because I don't take the noise as if it's fixed and it's definite. So I realized that some of those messages have endured for years, and that's my not listening to them, or my noticing the noise but not taking them on, for me, gave me choice, gave me energy, gave me choice, gave me focus, gave me, it gave me myself. So Danusia is alive and well despite having 10 kids. And so Danusia is alive because, you know, in terms of vibrancy and energy and personality, because I haven't lost myself to motherhood or an identity that is kind of foisted on me as a mother. And I speak to a lot of women about life, actually, and they're right across age groups, from 20s right through to late 80s, 90s. And what I notice is, particularly with young women considering whether they want to become mothers, first, I'm not pro motherhood. You know, I'm not kind of banging on that everything is about being a mother. And in fact, the first piece of noise that I take apart in the book is this one, which it says, the noise says motherhood is our calling. Because pretty well all the noise says that we're not really a real woman until we become a mother. That doesn't matter if you're a lawyer, you know, you've got you're a doctor, you've got your business, your nail salon, your whatever it is. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you're doing in terms of your career aspirations. That ultimately, what the noise says is, well, of course, really, what you're really here for is to have children. And when you have children, they will be your focus. Like, you hear this through the narrative of, oh, my children are everything to me. My, you know,
Yeah.
nothing is as good as my children. There's nothing that could, you know, and you'll hear this from really, really powerfully successful women who are held up as powerfully successful career women and entrepreneurs. You'll hear this as partly because in our society, the narrative is that we've got to say that, because of course we're so kind of interlocked. It's like this intersecting web of noise where actually, even if we don't feel like it, we need to say it, otherwise we don't fit. So for instance, one of the other pieces is the noise says mothers will feel guilty. So in my research, I found that not all mothers feel guilty at all, but what they know is that they're supposed to say they feel guilty. And what they do say is that they feel guilty that they don't feel guilty. So so they're feeling guilty, but it isn't about what people think it's about. Yeah, it's that actually they don't fit. And to be a real mother, you should be feeling guilty about, you know, being torn between your job and your family, not being good enough mother. I mean, you know, all this tripe that actually is trotted out, and the noise keeps it going. And then other mothers, women say, oh, well, of course you're going to be feeling guilty, aren't you? And then people are like, oh, okay. Well, okay, all right then. And so it's this perpetuating cycle. And so how you find out what is for you and what isn't for you, well, you start becoming conscious about what's simple noise and what you've been told to kind of take in and been inculcated into your own system, what actually is how you feel. Like, you know, the noise says mother's ambition shrinks. I've looked at all the research, conducted some myself. I mean, it is not true. It
Yeah.
simply is a lie. The fact that a woman might carry a baby, you know, biologically, or she may birth through a surrogate, or she may adopt. How logically does that mean that her actual ambition shrinks? No, it's the circumstances in which it becomes a mother that then affects her ability to conduct her career. That's very different. It's a very different
Yes.
proposition. Yeah.
Yes, it's a very, very different. When you say it like that,
Yeah.
it just makes complete sense, and it's very strange. I just had this conversation yesterday with someone who is slightly older than me, and they don't think they want to have children, which is totally fine. And it was just very funny chatting, because I am the opposite. I know I really want to have children, but I also want to have career. And then it's like having this discussion, realizing actually you don't have to pick. It's not one or the other. And it's really like, the noise we hear and these myths that are constantly spread around society are just myths.
Yeah, and it's structural conditions.
Yes.
So it's the reality of overpriced childcare. It's the way that some mothers, because being a mother is not a monolithic identity, so some mothers do have access to certain privileges that others don't. So I have a chapter in the book called "The Noise Says Mothers Must Be Sexless and Sexy," because it's both. Now, some women, mothers, particularly, for instance, I'll take white mothers at the moment. So they need to be both virgin, sexless, which is ridiculous if you're a mother, but nevertheless kind of prim, if you imagine prim and buttoned up and focused on the children, keeping them all clean, tidy. No, sex is not my thing. But they also have to be MILFs. So they need to be available, but not too available, thank you very much. No, keep your desire under wraps, just enough to procreate. On the other hand, if you take black mothers, they're sexualized anyway. So what I'm talking about is all the studies, all the research which suggests that, just the trope, if you like, the assumption about black women and mothers would be that their relationship to sexuality is very different from white women's. So where it becomes difficult is that if I chose to not dress my children as a white, privileged, educated woman with kids, if I chose not to clean them, not to bother, to take them out in their pajamas for a walk in the woods, we live rurally, that's why I say that, to take them out, actually to think, oh, so what, to be potentially just liberal about the way I do things, to be passionate about what I care about, to shout, for instance. My shouting, my liberalness will be perceived in a very, very different way than my friend who might be a black mother. The kind of, the way that she's treated and the assumptions that are built in around her will be very different. So I have a very close friend who's a black mother, black friend, who has children. So when she talks, she will be told to calm down. Yeah, she'll be told to calm down simply because she's using her voice. I use my voice, and I'm actually encouraged to use my voice. I'm encouraged to be, I wouldn't say forceful, but to be emphatic. Yeah, that's that would be it. That when I make my point, I can emphasize because it's okay. But that's because there's an acceptability, and it's pure racism. So I write about it, and in the book, it was really important to me that I didn't write a whitewashed version of this noise, because the noise is not the same to me as it will be for other women and mothers. Yeah, it's just not true. And so many books about juggling motherhood and career are written as if we all occupy the same space. We do not. Yeah, we just don't.
Yeah. And by acknowledging that, I think it's crucial to sort of putting in place things that can change it, because all these whitewash versions of motherhood just ignore the reality of the situation that is very different for many people. I mean, access to childcare is a massive thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's all well to say women can have it all, but if you can't afford childcare, that's already a big hurdle to overcome.
Yeah, exactly. And who's occupying the low paid jobs? You know, who gets to be frontline workers in the pandemic, who had to go and work in retail outlets, who was able to be at home homeschooling, even though it was, you know, a difficult situation for many, but who had that luxury of, or let's just say, we'll call it a luxury, but you know, actually many women, many mothers did not get that luxury. They didn't. So and they are low paid. So it's a really complex, nuanced situation. And I'm really lucky that on the School for Mothers podcast, I intentionally invite guests on who say no to being mothers. And when I write to them, and I don't often write to people as guests, but I go out of my way, mainly because we've got, you know, people come to us now, which I'm so thankful for. But the fact is, when I do write, I often write to those that are anti having kids, or you know, have a gripe about motherhood for whatever reason. And they usually say, no, I think you've got the wrong end of the stick, Danusia. You know, you've got a school for mothers, and I've done everything to make sure I can't be a mother. I'm like, yes, and that's why I want to talk with you, because it's so important to hear the whys of that. It's like, I'm never to convince anyone. It's to hear, oh, it's the conditions of motherhood, for instance, that you're rejecting. It's the conditions. If the conditions of motherhood were better, pretty well all my guests have said, if they were better, I'd consider having a child. I'd consider becoming a mother. But the way they are at the moment, forget it. What's built into it as a sacrificial model? Why would I do that? Why would I give up my career? Why would I make it such hard work life? I don't see very many women and mothers actually enjoying it. That's sad. It's really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, to come back to kind of the kind of ongoing theme of the podcast, that the podcast is called like, Hey, It Gets Better.
Yeah,
And it does. And we've just spoke about kind of, and I think it's really important that even on the podcast where you look at things getting better, that we talk about the complexities of these situations, because like what we say about motherhood and the structural barriers, that is also applicable to many other areas of life and many other routes that I guess when we grow up, we're kind of conditioned to think we should go down. There are structural barriers to education, going to university, getting jobs, certain jobs, and it it can be changed. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of conversation and a lot of action. But I think that acknowledging it and being able to understand why people make certain decisions is key to progress.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's good to. I learned as an academic that one of the most powerful things we can do if we're building any kind of argument, and as an academic, that's what you're doing. If you're building models, then you're going to build, here's why it should be like this. So the power, though, is to always look at the objections to it, to put yourself. The really smart academics can actually argue for the exact opposite. They have that facility, and I loved doing that, knowing that, okay, so if I were to put myself in the opposite shoes, what would I be saying here? And so, yeah, it does get better. And along the way, life's rarely smooth. Pathways are more complex than we ever imagined. Our journeys, the route to what we were hoping for is rarely without some pit to fall in or to trip on, unexpected, kind of little things that we have to just encounter. We never know what's going to come. And so our biggest thing is to equip ourselves with the resources, and I do mean the internal resources, to be able to weather whatever happens. That's the thing. And then we can make it better, because whatever happens in our lives, whatever really shitty situation, to be honest, if we have the ability to turn it into gold, then we are billionaires. We are absolute billionaires in life. It's not the money. It's, can we convert whatever happens to us into this brilliance and genius? That's what matters.
That's really powerful and also really true. Like, I'm just listening to you say that and I'm just thinking, that's genius. Like, it makes complete sense when you say it like that. And it's true that if you go through and you expect everything to be like a fairy tale, the ending is going to be really happy, and you have that predictable arc of a story. That's not the case. Life is so up and down. It's quite ridiculous. But if you can get through it, and you can turn things into gold, then you can achieve and stay true to who you are. And I think that's amazing what you've just said.
Yeah, and that's what life is about, Katie. It's sadly, people do get ill, relationships do change, break up, careers don't go the way we think, all these things that we have a goal in mind, and the journey to get there will be quite different than we ever anticipated. Some of it might go really to plan, but it's actually in the pieces that we will learn the most. And let's be honest, actually it is in adversity where we grow. It isn't. We don't grow our biggest amount, our kind of most expansive selves in the comfortable moments. It's never when we do, ever.
You've got to be uncomfortable to actually push your boundaries.
Yeah.
And if you're comfortable, you'll never grow, because you can. Why, if you're comfortable, why are you going to change?
Well, yeah, because it's. I mean, yes, it's never going to change. So actually, what you've got is what you've got, and we know that it's boundless. The opportunities in life are boundless. They really are. And yes, structural conditions, our social locations, make a big difference to what those opportunities might be right now in front of us. But actually, even with that, there are opportunities. There are. So, and even with the worst cases, we could mention all sorts of, so many people who have changed this world actually for the better, because they have managed to see the brilliance and the beauty of their very difficult journeys. And they've brought that. The next piece is not just doing it for yourself, but actually then bringing the messages from your learning to others. That's an add-on. Not everyone's meant to do that, but certainly, doing it for yourself is the first thing, and recognizing, wow, I didn't get here like I thought I would, but okay. Inner resilience, inner skills. That's the thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today. There's been so much wisdom in this conversation, and it's been great to have. So I'm just going to leave you with the last question that I ask everyone, which you've kind of already covered, but if you just want to add anything to it, it is, what would you say to someone who just right now, they don't feel like it's going to get better for them? It can be in any perspective of their life. They just don't feel like it gets better. What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a lovely question, isn't it? Well, I would really start to look for any tiny crumb of evidence that you have done something, whether, you know, in the world, like in life around you. It might be like 2 steps away. It doesn't have to be grand. I would try and remember the moments when you made a difference, when something made a difference to you. It doesn't have to be you that's the active one. I would try to hold on to the crumb of when something did get better, because grand gestures and grand learning can feel too much when we're not sure that it can get better. And now, one of the things is that everything does pass. It really does pass. And just remember that the seasons, no matter what happens, no matter what disasters happen, what awful feelings we have, that the buds come out, they always blossom. As winter comes, the autumn, you know, those seasons continue, and they will do long after all the listeners, yourself, me, all of us are no longer on this earth. If we're really lucky, those are going to continue if we can get our climate change, you know, our attention to that. But at the moment, we're very lucky that actually the seasons are with us. And there's a little clue in there that things, there's a cycle. There's a cycle. Nothing is forever. And to be deeply loving to yourself. Write on your mirror, I am enough and loved. Go and get a pen and write on a mirror and look at that. I am enough and loved.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you found it helpful. I really appreciate all the support I get for Hey It Gets Better. It would be amazing if you could subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want some more content, then you can always follow us on Instagram at Hey It Gets Better. And for more stories of inspiration and resources to help you get through life, visit our website, heyitgetsbetter.com. I hope you have a wonderful week, and remember, hey, it gets better.